Welcome back to the Simple Jargon podcast for episode 5. We've got a little bit of a backlog of episodes, so I'm hoping to get those out here in the next little bit. But the world keeps on turning, news keeps on happening,
Sure it
and
is. Yes.
things keep on needing to be discussed. So lay it on me. What's going on?
Well, just to start with something more fun, I don't know if you saw the video that White House produced, specifically, Jill Biden produced of, White House Christmas, from the White House. Oh my God.
I haven't seen it.
People having so much fun with it, and most people commenting, and that's exactly what I thought. It's like reminds you about Hunger Games. Because you have all these weird characters dressed up like, really weird, like in Hunger Games, dancing, and it's just so embarrassing. I cannot even tell you how bad it is, And but what's even more sad about it, that a group that's produced that, they were showing, like protesting against, defund the police. They are radical anti-white group, that producing, stuff against very racist stuff against white people, and they end up doing this awful, embarrassing video in the White House. So that was kind of fun. If you get a chance to put it up, I'm sure you can find it quickly. But it's just it's just horrible. So that's on a fun note.
Well, and let me just take a little guess as well. If this is really, really like Hunger Games-esque, does the video kind of showcase like an abundance of like food and festivities and that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Do you get what I mean?
Really
like in the Hunger Games, it's all about prestige, which is something we talked about in a previous episode. It's like things can be going terribly, but let's put on a different face. And you have all of these people in the Hunger Games who are in their districts starving for lack of resources and funds and just food enough to celebrate. But then you have the people at this Hunger Games thing where they have these massive feasts where food is being wasted, and it makes you think too of like that the stereotypical Roman aristocrat, right?
Yeah, very much.
Okay, all right. I'll watch the video for the sake of knowing what my country has produced, but I'm pretty sure I already know what the video is and what it is they're attempting to showcase.
Yeah. But the kind of, I'm kind of actually very interesting that what you mentioned, because last week or so, for the last 3 weeks, we're having extreme slowdown at our workplace. Extreme slowdown, and probably 60% slowdown, less than before. So finally, now we have much more time. I can hear a little guy talking.
He's starting to learn. He's starting to learn words, and he wants to use them. So
yeah.
But anyway, I'll do some audio magic.
Right. But finally, we have more time to talk, because now we have all this space when there is it's not busy. And I've been talking to people more lately, and I know the things are not doing well in a country right now, and I hear it all the time from other people on the different podcasts, how people are struggling, to make ends meet. But I never really got to talk to, people at my workplace, but lately I had that chance. And I was really surprised the amount of hopelessness, depression and worry about the future, because, we actually made more people on average than most people make around here in our workplace here. Quite a bit, more than other people that work around here. But the situation is that those people are struggling. But it's not just the struggling. They don't see any future hope. And you can really tell it's that kind of cloud over them lately. And kind of touched me, especially yesterday, like for some reason. I don't know if you kind of had any chance to talk to any people about that at where you are, or if people just put on happy face and kind of pretend everything is okay. But lately I'm really sensing that things are not okay.
From our own experience here, especially, well, I won't say especially in Canada. Canada's, I wouldn't know what the numbers are, but I would assume that Canada's inflation rate is comparable or greater than the American inflation rate currently. But regardless, even if Canada's currency inflation rate isn't as high, it's so pegged by the US dollar that fluctuations in the value of US currency also has a direct effect. So there's like lots of compounding things. But when you go to the grocery store and eggs are literally 3 times as expensive as they were, 2-3 years ago, and twice as expensive as they were 6 months ago, then like something really, really drastic has happened. And there's all those memes going around, which I find depressing and hilarious at the same time. When I don't know if you've seen any of them, but it's just, you take any picture of any shopping cart and then they put a little caption on it that says something to the effect of, "This is the most expensive vehicle to operate in 2023." Like something to that effect. And anybody that looks at it, anybody that looks at it immediately knows, like, for anybody higher up to pretend that the general population doesn't have a visceral feeling of what inflation is doing and what the effects on the economy have been in the last couple of years is just like, it's beyond naive. It is Hunger Game levels of ignoring what is right in front of you. Yes. When a meme like that, so simple, and yet sums up so much about what 90% of the American population is feeling right now.
Right.
And that's the other thing, is like, more and more of the US population, and this might be a good thing to some degree, like just on a social level, more and more of the US population is feeling the effects of what we're talking about. 10 years ago, you wouldn't have looked at middle class or upper middle class people as really being concerned or for financially in need of a lot of things outside of their own personal issues. You got gambling problems, you got spending problems, like those things happen. But the general middle to upper middle class family feel like they could comfortably afford a couple of cars, they could comfortably afford their mortgage, so they have a house moving forward. Like, all those things are taken care of, and they still have the ability to make savings. We're getting to the point right now where, just to keep your business afloat, whatever is above upper middle class, even those people look at that meme about a shopping cart being expensive and go, "Holy crap, yeah, you're right." Like, do you get what I'm saying? It's like higher and higher up in this like scale of economic success, people are starting to like really, really feel it. Because you might be in a position to have lots of money tied up in capital investments and all these kinds of things, so that you're not considered upper middle class. You're like in the millionaire status or above. But inflation is hitting everybody. It's hitting every single one of their businesses. Those expenses are going up. It's hitting every single one of like their own personal expenses or anyway, you get what I'm saying. So it's like,
yes,
I'm starting to feel that one of the benefits to this is that it's like, referencing Hunger Games again, it's easy to think of this massive disconnect between the people at the top and the general population. And that's clearly still happening with like the upper ups. But it feels like more and more of the kind of people on the bottom end of the uppers are starting to truly grasp what is happening. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes,
Can you see it in podcasts, particularly like... Sorry, go ahead.
No, there's kind of a couple interesting things, like that that also came up, like, a few times. Was like one of the person was share with me, they were working for years or fixing their credit. So their credit is fine because they used to live in California and things are so expensive there. And he was telling me, where they live with the family, that, somebody keep constantly breaking into their cars. They would have take their children on a playground, and they would have finding keep needles and stuff in a playground, and homeless everywhere. It just got so bad. It was not only expensive, but got so bad that they decided to move to Arizona. And when they moved here, they were kind of put themselves a little bit in a credit struggle. But they were working on it for the last 3 years, and they fixed it. Now they were approved for $240,000 to buy a home. Well, for $240,000 here right now, you cannot even buy tiny homes, I don't think. So he's kind of very, very sad and disappointed, because he was really hoping they might be able to buy a home. And there's like nothing, even at price range, that would come even close, So yeah, he's very disappointed. But also another, interesting subject came up. And, some people were actually mentioned last few times to like maybe somebody or them or somebody in their family try to apply for the Social Security disability. But none of those people were really exposed to the process, so they were naive about it. And, you have two disabilities here in the United States. You have one that's provided by your workplace if you have it. If you're lucky enough and you sign up for it, you have a disability from work in the United States. Now, what they don't tell you is that, you get injured, so something happens and you get disability, but nobody tells you that after, 1 year or so on a disability, the insurance company is going to cancel your insurance, and then you have to hire an attorney to fight it, to get it back. And it's going to take you months to get it back. And it's going to cost you a fortune, to do it, thousands of dollars that's going to get taken away if you get a back pay. But they don't tell you that. So for those people, might be totally left without any means to live if the insurance company decides to do that. So this is your private insurance, Then you have the government Social Security disability. And just like us, we were thinking, okay, you apply and it's going to be a fairly fast process because those people are desperate. You don't apply for the disability because, you want to go on vacation or have a fun time. You apply because you have some kind of illness or injury that prevents you from work. And you have you have no income. So you're desperate, to have some kind of income to survive. And then you find out that that process applying for, government, disability can take years. Like, and literally might take you 3 years before you get it, if you even get it. Going through the process, denial, takes, a year, even just to them to look at it when you apply. And how do you survive? I think that learning about that process personally, because, I was involved in some of that process, was a shock to me that they would leave people without income for so long. And those people that I talked about it, that they are trying to apply or thinking about applying, they are shocked and scared, if it makes sense.
Right. Yeah, no, it's, I don't know that I have any helpful commentary on it, but it's disgusting to think about how that kind of lines up. Like the insurance companies, from an operations standpoint, I get it, but this is something inherently wrong with relying on these kinds of insurance companies for these kinds of things. Like I don't think what I'm about to say is I don't think that necessarily, outside of just having to suffer the business reputation of customers knowing you do this, that there's anything wrong legally with an insurance company automatically having an automatic denial of claims process. It's basically, it's a term, and denial claims process is such a ubiquitous term in all kinds of insurance because it's the cost benefit ratio that all insurance companies do on every single case. They have learned that they end up saving more money in the long run by automatically denying every single claim when it comes to certain things. Like obviously not every single one of your dental claims gets denied, and like I'm generalizing here, but we're talking about like really, really, really big things that have like a massive effect on the insurance company because they're never going to recoup that kind of expense from the premiums of that one person.
Right.
Then by default, they just deny it. And it doesn't matter how necessary that service is to the person who needs it and who's paid for that insurance for so long in their operations. They just, look, if we know we need to end up paying out 75% of these, but we will save on 25% of them if we just deny every single one and make everybody do the appeals process. We incur an extra 10% in administrative fees dealing with those appeals processes, but we get to pocket that 15%. So it's it's a no-brainer that insurance companies are going to do that, right? So you almost can't. I think it's disgusting. I think if you're not running a business where you're trying to cater to your customers as well as make money, you're running a business where you're trying to extort money from your customers. That's what those insurance companies are doing.
Desperate people, though.
Yeah.
You know what the difference is? You're not talking about just
I know
people that are really desperate, you know.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's I understand it. I know why insurance companies do it. I also legally think they should be allowed to do that. And this is kind of why the whole idea of relying on those kinds of insurance policies for those particular things becomes so I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but not tragic, but like it's bound for failure in the long term, you know, like because the insurance company has a vested interest in not paying out at the time when people need it the most. And you don't rely on that insurance until you need it. Right. So it's like the one time that you need to be able to rely on it, you know, they're going to automatically deny it. And then you have to go through the appeals process. So that's one thing. Insurance companies, disgusting. We can have a whole conversation about insurance and its different iterations between volcano insurance and health insurance and car insurance. Maybe we should have a podcast on that one day, but it might be very boring for people. So we will make a podcast solely about that so people can skip it if they don't want to. But it's a fascinating thing, like just how people view insurance when it should be the thing that's like the very last. Like it's the insurance is the thing that you don't use unless you absolutely need to. And there's so many examples of insurance systems today that exist where it's the first line of defense. It's so counterintuitive, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that the government does it to people as well is even more disgusting. As an objectivist, I would say those systems, those social net systems shouldn't exist on behalf of the government, period. But at the point where they do exist, and that tax money is expropriated from people at the point of a gun, or at least the threat that you're going to go to jail if you don't pay your taxes, then you should be able to get that service immediately if you need it. Should be. I understand it doesn't happen. But it's more layers of disgusting when that's not even insurance that you're opting into. They take it no matter what. The government's going to do that regardless. And then when you really, really need it, they also kind of shaft you.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. might take a years to actually get it. It's just mind-blowing. And there's another interesting thing that I learned by talking to a doctor is, we have a United States, there's an opioid crisis. They believe there's about 100,000 people, dying every year now in the United States from the, opioid overdose, But, so the government wants to fight it and find a solution to it. Now listen to the solution after talking to the doctor. So one of the first solution is cut the production by 50%. So what's happening now here in our area? Pharmacies don't have it. People are desperate to get their pain meds. They truly need it for their pain. It's not like, I'm not talking about people who are abusing the system. People that truly need it, and they go to pharmacy and they don't have it. It's not in stock. And so people are, I don't know what, panicking, like, what are they going to do? And the second thing is, because of the abuses,
undoubtedly some of those people eventually then turn to the street to get it, because the one place that there's always going to be a supply is going to be the street. The price might go up if you reduce the supply from the government, but bad people will always get their hands on it, and the pharmacy will always be the last one to be stocked. So,
but here, that's the problem, Alistair, now.
Anyway,
that we have a massive problem with those, medication that you acquire on the streets. Most of them are laced with fentanyl, and people dying because of that, or you're getting even more addicted, or causing health problems because of the fentanyl. It's like epidemic here. We can be guaranteed if you buy it off the street, it's going to be laced now with fentanyl. If you buy your like, let's say people want to buy oxycodone or Percocet, that's the most common medication, but those are laced. It's just scary, to buy anything on the street. I know people are going to do it because they need it, but what we're creating even more problem by this solution, what they're doing. And also now what they're doing now is they tighten restrictions on the doctors to prescribe it. And actually they monitor, all your, there's some kind of way that they have a way to monitor, the doctor was showing me that, all your prescription and your tests and stuff are being monitored, and the doctors are being automatically sent email if it's flagged to review your case. And what's happening is, because doctors are afraid to prescribe you the medication and get in trouble, they're refusing to prescribe it. And now we have all these different rules about, okay, if you take pain medication, you have to be drug tested every month, and you have to you cannot have any trace of alcohol, any trace of cannabis, any trace of any drugs in your system. But what's even more scary, that there is many
recreationally legal substances. We'll just add that.
What's even more
recreationally legal?
Right. What's even more scary, that prescriptions that are like legal prescription for medications, I believe like it's clonopin and different medications that people use if they are bipolar or stuff like that. They need those medications. They need those meds. They are like, people take lots of different medications that affect your brain because they need it. They truly need it, but because they could somehow interfere with proper functioning, or there's a danger with those narcotics, now they stopping prescribing those to those people that for the pain. And even our doctor is talking about not prescribing anymore because they're afraid that they're going to get their license suspended if they keep prescribing the medication. It's just getting to really I understand the reason, but I don't understand, and nobody talks to you about, like, let's say they say, okay, you're going to test it for anything in your system, we cut you off immediately from those pain meds. Now, I don't know if you ever watched anything on how you're supposed to withdraw. You're supposed to withdraw 10% a week from the medication. 10% of your medication, opioids for a week, otherwise can send you into really bad place or even kill you if you do it suddenly. But they just would cut your medication suddenly and nobody cares. So yeah, that's it's just interesting things happening, which on so many different levels, and nothing makes sense anymore.
It's like it's giving me sweats. Like just thinking about that. Is like and it isn't the point in our conversation, but my history. So I've never been prescribed a drug like that, but I definitely understand the withdrawal process and the idea of just being. But it's different for a drug addict who has gotten to the point in their life where they're like, I want to get clean. Let me try and get off these drugs, because you are tied into a network where you can get access to the drugs that you need to slowly get off. When you're someone with genuine chronic pain that's just trying to get through their life, they work every day, they do all the things, and they relied on these drugs, and then the doctor just suddenly cuts you off. You're not in a position to go down to the street and get something that's going to help you withdraw. You're not, you've legally acquired your drugs because you're not trying to be, someone on the wrong side of the law. You're not trying to be a drug addict. You're using these because functionally you need them, because the medical system hasn't provided you a different solution to your problem. Right? Like whatever that case is. So to suddenly cut those people off, you're right. It's like, not only are you then facing traditional withdrawal, which depending on someone's circumstances can literally kill you. And regardless is a horrific thing to try and go through. And just very, very dangerous, especially for the kinds of people that are in the conditions where they might get cut off like that, right? Like and you have no solution. No solution. You're not eligible to go down to the methadone clinic. You're not, or the time it would take to get too late. You've already, Oh man. But and again, like to some degree, you can kind of understand why like you said, you can understand why doctors are doing it. Like they're genuinely concerned about their license, because the solution to the problem of copious amounts of drugs coming across our southern border is to get doctors in trouble for prescribing drugs. That's the obvious solution. And so doctors are being sarcastic, but so doctors are in a position though where if a different solution isn't going to be had, some administration somewhere, whether it's the DEA or whoever, is going to come cracking down on doctors because some government official somewhere is saying we having a fentanyl, drug epidemic in the country. We need to do something about it. And so eventually it's going to get down to the doctor somewhere. So they're being cautious. They're going above and beyond what maybe they would have done 10 years ago in terms of like monitoring people's behavior, not just, and we've talked about this. It isn't just like this isn't where you've been arrested by the cops and they want to find out if you're intoxicated. So you're getting a drug test at the police station. That is a very clear idea of what's going to happen. You're going to be tested for an illicit drug in your system at that time, and if you are, then you're going to get in trouble, yada yada yada. That's not necessarily the kinds of things these doctors are looking for. Like they're doing general blood tests and stuff and maybe seeing a spiked precursor in kidney function that might be indicative of more habitual alcohol usage, and then even that is in the back of their head going, ooh, I've now seen that. I don't need some bureaucrat coming down later asking why I didn't cut this person off when they're clearly an alcohol addict. And like an alcoholic, and I can't speak. But you get what I'm saying? It's like they're going a step beyond to kind of find reasons to cut people off out of an abundance of caution for their own medical license.
Right.
And to generalize, you must be doing that without really thinking about the ultimate effect on the patient, right? Like that's scary. It's very scary.
Right. Yeah.
All because, we don't want to address our entirely unsecured southern border. And people might think how ridiculous it is to generalize a problem like that with something like that. And I'm not saying that's the only source of the issue, but you also can't ignore the fact that all of these issues are stemming because the government is trying to reactionary, like, solve the problem of this epidemic of fentanyl deaths in the country. But the trickle-down effect is it's affecting so many more people than the ones that are dying from fentanyl, which itself is horrific and horrible, and we don't want it. But you think the number of people dying from fentanyl is bad, just based on what we're talking about. Think of the number of innocent people who are going to get cut off from their medication and have drastic effects on their life. The sheer number of people that's going to affect is well beyond the number that are being affected directly by the fentanyl. It's crazy.
I'm curious which way it's going to go, but yes, it's pretty crazy. And I wonder if you could find out maybe somehow what's happening at your country, about that. But
I kind of keep my head down here because Canada has a serious drug problem. Like, to anybody who's lived in Canada and been to any of our big major cities, then you are painfully aware of that. Like, for any Canadians or the world in general to look at
I saw it this summer. Yes, I saw it this summer. I was shocked.
Yeah. It's insane. Again, that's to also include all of the benefits. It's like you go to some places in Canada, kind of more rural areas, just like in the United States, where they probably haven't seen a serious drug addict because their particular town hasn't been infested with some kind of person who's trying to sell those illicit drugs. So you have these, like, really pristine communities, for lack of a better word, in the middle of nowhere. But as soon as you get into more urban areas, it's like the problem is really, really obvious. And I almost think Canada, to some degree, does a disservice to themselves because of how many support networks are there. Canadians really want to have these support networks for people, and that's great to some degree. But then you see cities like Toronto and Vancouver, and to some degree Montreal, where the problem, like, feeds in itself, like, and I was in that community or that culture when I was younger, so I understand what it's like. Like, you as a homeless person in Ontario, for example, you plan your kind of traveling around between cities like London, Kitchener, Hamilton, Toronto, because you know how to work the system. The system allows you to stay in shelters for X number of days. There's wait lists on the shelters in Toronto because there's more homeless people than they have shelters. So you get on a wait list, and then you know what day you're allowed to go back to Toronto, and you can stay there for a couple of weeks where you will make more money on the street busking there than you will in other cities. There's a whole, like, economy derived out of people who just want to live within that system. And they can do it because there are so many shelters, there's so many, like, free food systems, and all of them are individually sponsored by government subsidies, tax grants, all those kinds of things, in addition to people's general charity and generosity, right? So I say that because it comes from the compassion of Canadians, but in the long run, I think Canadians do a disservice to themselves because it's one of those things where you're enabling that kind of behavior, and you're effectively telling people that it's okay, right? Because we got your back, and so then they get into the system where they never want to try harder.
Yes, I was shocked just being in a smaller city, the sheer epidemic of young people. They look like they are gone totally. Like their appearance, their mental state, they are gone. And they are young people, but the sheer numbers shocked me, to see there's so many of them it was something new experience for me and a little bit scary. And I don't know if you saw lately, I don't know if we talked about it last time, but the Tucker Carlson actually establishing now his own media. I don't know if you saw it. He's starting his own media, and
Not
he has this
specifically, no.
yeah, he has his own website that you can like a register. I think it's about.
Is he still partnering with X in some way?
Yeah, he's still with X, but now his main thing is going to be his own production and his own media, like a subscription.
I kind of got the impression that's. Yeah, I got the impression that's already what he was doing, but I guess this is just the snowball of the. It was obvious that's kind of the direction he was going when he's already set up a studio and interview room and like all those kinds of things that you would need to facilitate that kind of production. It makes sense. It was obvious that was going to happen, but no, I hadn't heard the kind of more formal announcement of those steps going forward.
Yeah,
so that's
I think
cool.
it's $9 a month at tuckercarlson.com. And if you pay by year, I think it ends up being like $6 or something a month if you do like a year subscription. And he's getting bolder and bolder. I've been watching lots of his stuff on YouTube because people still, post lots of his cut some of his stuff and post on YouTube. So I've been watching lately so many interesting interviews, like with Alex Jones, it was an interesting one. Then which one was that was very interesting that I watched a couple of days ago was about with this guy, the whistleblower from the military, high-ranking guy, and actually part of that program about UFOs. Now that was very interesting, that interview, because that guy, he's high in military, and he was kind of somehow, I don't quite understand his role, but he will somehow oversee and collect all the information on that or monitor that program. But what came up, what the guy was claiming is that they have been collecting UFO artifacts for at least 90 years, the US military. And he claims that supposedly they even collected some kind of biologic matter, okay, on, from that. But what he was saying, those programs are so secret and they are run in connection with private industries that nobody knows what's going on and nobody has access. I guess there were some people from Congress that were tried because they're supervising the military, actually. They are in charge of that, or Pentagon, and they will not allow them the access, and nobody really knows what is going on with that research. It's so hidden that nobody, even high-ranking officials in the different areas of the government and stuff, nobody gives them access or tells them what's going on. And what was also interesting in one of he's also saying how he's being, now when he came as a whistleblower and actually testified for the Congress, how they're coming after him. He's afraid even for his life. But what was also interesting, he was talking to some kind of high government meeting that with people before he was even accused of anything. They had the meetings, and what came up in those meetings that he believes, and other people believe, that many people were actually assassinated for trying to expose something, and nobody wants to talk about it. It's just totally hidden. That's pretty interesting. Well,
I find it fascinating, and the conspiracy theorist, that tiny voice in the back of my head right now, definitely thinks it's really funny that all of this stuff is happening when there's much more important things to be talking about in the grand scheme of things, and it lets the media kind of be distracted a little bit. But that aside, I also get this overwhelming. I don't know if you remember the movie Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark, but there's a scene at the end of that movie where, and it's an iconic scene where he's recovered the Ark, they're handing it back over to the two government, the two government bureaucrats that had originally tasked him with, please go and find this thing because we don't want the Nazis to get it, yada, yada, yada. And Indiana Jones looks at him and says, like, what's being done with it? And they look right at him and they say, we have our top men looking at it. And says, what? Like something he kind of like wants a bit more information. And then their only response is, our top men. And then it cuts to the scene where it's a giant freaking warehouse, and this arc thing is being like, it's in a box, and it's the idea of the scene is it's showing that it's just being like put away. No one's really looking at it. No one's investigating it. It's just one of many things that they're going to claim they're doing something with, but it's really just being locked away. So that's part of my reaction to some of this stuff is, I think of that scene, but then I also think about the idea, and it would lend itself to this. Because I'll just say it right now. Like I'm ultimately a very, very big skeptic. I don't think that the actual scientific community out there has any substantial amount of evidence to lean towards the aliens that do probably exist out there, in the statistically obvious chances that, you know, there's some intelligent life somewhere out there in the universe. Sure. What are the chances they've actually gotten here and are messing around with us? Probably not. Probably not. I'm a huge skeptic of that. Like, I don't think for a second that's the case. You can believe aliens exist while simultaneously not thinking that they're hiding amongst us. Like, those two aren't mutually exclusive ideas, right? So, like, when these things are coming out, I inherently do not think these are aliens. You know, Show me some more evidence. More evidence is coming out right now, so we'll see what unfolds in the next few years. I might be finding myself doing a 180 on this, but I don't believe this is alien activity. Not for a second. Occam's razor suggests that there's some kind of other explanation. And in my head, the fact that these things are so secret just leans to, like, me thinking this is, in my head, it's like a stereotype. Think of like the ultimate like army grunt. Oog. Like, can you join the military? Are you able to do this? Yes, then welcome to the army, sir. Like, the complete lack of intelligence. Get a bunch of those guys in a room, tell them some black sludge in some messed up piece of metal is some unknown thing, and don't tell anybody about it. And who knows 50 years later what those people are convinced that is, when they haven't allowed any scientist from outside their little echo chamber to look at it. You know what I mean? Like, this is a hyperbole exaggeration of what could be happening, but I just picture a bunch of people who do not know what they're talking about, but are a part of this secret, you know, like classified project, standing around something that if an actual scientist looked at would be like, well, it's this and this, or we can run these series of tests to identify what it is.
And he was actually talking about
they're not being.
He was saying that because it's so secret, they can't get a real scientist to actually work on it because it's so secret.
It's like, if you don't actually have scientists looking at this stuff, then it is just a bunch of 4-star generals who have access to this classified project and what they think it is.
It seems to be that the private industry, like I'm talking about those military companies, big ones, you know, like Lockheed and stuff, I guess they seem to be the one. Boeing seem to be working on those projects somehow or involved in it. But it's what I was more fascinated, honestly, you know, actually from that interview, what I was more fascinated, it was not maybe there are aliens, because somehow we got so somehow jaded about it. We saw so many science fiction movies. I didn't question that. There was no part that really, you know, was odd to me. What was odd to me was when he was talking about the lack of oversight and secrecy, and people have, you know, that should have power and right to get information, they cannot get anything. That's what was more mind-blowing, that how can something be shielded from, you know, from the people that's supposed to be supervising it? You know what I mean? And they were also joking about that the trillions and trillions dollars that are unaccounted by the military. They were joking about
Oh
it.
my God.
I mean,
Yeah. Like
trillions.
how many
Half of it.
how many audits the Pentagon has failed now in a
Yeah,
row.
yeah. Nobody knows where the money are going. It's just,
Yeah. And
so
it really comes down
interesting.
to that. Like the ultimate conspiracy theorist again wants to think that there's all this like malicious intent. But and some of it maybe there is, but ultimately I think what it comes down to is it's bureaucratic budgetary allocation is the culprit here. You operate in a system where you are approved for a project. Maybe that project has a rubber stamp classified on it. Well, good. Then nobody can ask any specific questions. But you're still allocated a budget. And if you don't spend that budget, then the next time your budget allocation comes up, they're going to cut your budget. So it's a bureaucratic like means of like, let's spend this money. Let's keep getting money for these projects. And the classified ones are just all the more, it kind of feels like this is just people who are in the know to gain budgetary allocation out of it. They're literally lining their pockets or their department's pockets to do these other things with projects that are rubber stamped classified and that we'll never hear about. And again, I don't have any information. This is all alleged, but you think of like involvement of people like Lockheed Martin and Boeing and stuff like that. It's like, there doesn't have to be an actual alien or any justifiable reason to be involved in a project. If the government is willing to hand Boeing or Lockheed money to be involved in a project, even if that project has absolutely no substantive worth, why would Boeing or Lockheed walk away from it? The government's still handing, you know what I mean? So I'm just saying, like, within the government departments, there could be this like insistence on just keep perpetuating these projects because we keep getting a budget for it. But then as soon as you involve private contractors, you now have another party who has a vested interest in continuing these projects, even if they're not benefiting the US population one iota, So but it's all conspiratorial because we have no evidence, and I'm just talking about alleged shit.
Interesting that
Sorry.
Right. The Tucker is really, just really getting very, very vocal about so many interesting things, so vocal. It's like, wow, like I'm really, really impressed how much stuff, he keeps addressing that nobody addressed for so long, really on a scale that he does. And it's kind of impressive, actually, some of his guests and stuff, be hard to keep up with it. We will have to, Alistair, probably finish soon. There is one more thing that I wanted to kind of, for fun, I forgot about it at the beginning, to mention is, I guess in the state of Washington, the Democrats proposed to put new law in place that you can go up to 1 year in jail for using landscaping tools like a lawnmower that's powered by gas. It has to be all electric. So if you're going to cut your grass in Washington State, you could go to jail for a year. But if it's going to pass, for you doing it, there's just like, I don't know where that insanity comes from, but it's just getting bizarre because actually the Biden administration just ordered all the government employees, if they travel, they have to use like EV vehicles or any transportation that's EV unless there is no alternative. So yes, it's just
that's
being
hilarious.
pushed really. Yeah, it's really being pushed a weird way on people. That it's just unprecedented. I'm hoping that alone, when if it's going to change if they were going to vote. I mean, I cannot know. Everybody's talking now openly about it. It's not going to be the candidate and so on. Everybody's still guessing what's going to happen. We guessed about it. Now, I saw a scary article today when they claiming that the Lara Trump, I don't know if you know who she is. She married one of the Trump's, child, and she's been kind of in the media involved and stuff. kind of hinted supposedly that Nikki Haley could be the running mate for the Trump. Now that freaking scared the heck out of me. So
it does. That's
I
like,
guess
that would be an, I'm going to say it now. My prediction would be that would be an epically stupid thing for Trump to do, because I think even he knows, and I think there's strategists within his campaign, within his family, whatever, who might be seeing benefits to it and might be suggesting it as an option. But I think, I hope, again, ultimately, we've talked about it. I don't necessarily want him as president, but it would be a good troll, and certainly better than the alternative right now. But I think he would be aware, in the grand scheme of things, that the majority of his voting base has a disdain for people like Nikki Haley, right? Like,
I hope so.
A majority of his voting base was disappointed in the long run that Pence was his running mate last time, because they saw the betrayal and all that kind of stuff in the long run. Right. So the people that are still pro-Trumpers now, that weren't pro-Trumpers because of the conservative religious aspect, what they gained from Pence and all that kind of stuff, the people that at this point, this many years on, and running up to another election now with everything that's going on, that are pro-Trump, they're pro-Trump because of Trump and because of his not being part of the establishment. That's just my general impression of it. So I don't think the good choice, or the choice that his campaign ultimately would make, would be going with someone like Nikki Haley, because it's such a slap in the face of a huge chunk of his voting base. That would call a lot of those people into question, that are like, wait a second, he's supposed to be fighting the system and draining the swamp, and he's running with her. So I don't think so, but that is a scary thing to think about. It's like because you have hope for a second, even if you and I don't ultimately believe 100% in what Trump, his policies or whatever, right? It feels like there's some hope if we can kind of see that shift again, if the population can come together and say, no, let's push back against the direction we have been going, with more about what this guy had to say,
Right. It's
that's scary.
What I the most sad is that the Vivek is really being aggressive in his having like 12 town halls a day. He is being really like out there working so hard. I've been watching some of his stuff. Oh my gosh, every time I watch him, I get more impressed with some of the stuff that he's saying. And he seemed to be, and so many comments from people, everybody's agreeing with, like, normal sense people, seeing, wow, this guy really has a solution. He really has some good ideas. And you realize that, like, everybody next to him is a dinosaur, an elephant that really, of the system. There's somebody that's such a right person that you couldn't pick up more right person for the job at the moment. Given the situation where we are, with everything. And I'm just so curious what's going to happen with him, But
me too.
He's so,
I hope he doesn't burn out.
The most qualified person ever out there, and some things he's saying are so impressive that I'm really impressed. And
he's the most intellectually qualified, and yet politically unqualified, which makes him the most ultimately qualified person for the position.
Yes.
It's amazing. But just as one more kind of balance to what we're saying, is like, I also think, because you and I would love to see, we've talked about it, we would love to see a version of the 2024 election with Trump running with Vivek as a running mate. There's just something kind of glorious about that. It puts Vivek in this awesome position to really launch a career in the future and still have 8 solid years of good that he could do for the country in his own presidency after that. It'd be awesome, super, super cool. But even in my head, I'm thinking, like, why wouldn't Trump do that? And I think there would be a bunch of good reasons for it, but just based on what Vivek is doing out there, and the things that he's saying, there's also an understanding on my part that from a campaign funding perspective, Trump would kind of be shooting himself in the foot if he got behind Vivek right now. Because there is undoubtedly a lot of donors to the Trump campaign that don't necessarily like what Vivek is saying.
No,
do you get what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. If the Vivek would implement lots of the things, they would really cut into establishment. And Trump, unfortunately, is still establishment guy. As much as
he's like, I like to think that he is trying to fight the system and drain the swamp to some degree. Right. I don't believe but to pretend that he's coming at it completely outside would be to ignore the fact that, yes, he wasn't a politician before, but he is a businessman that has schmoozed and wined and dined politician his entire business career. So he is inherently directly involved in politics. He always has been. While he's in rap videos and running ridiculous TV shows in the past, he was involved in politics. He just wasn't a politician, right? So I understand people that think he's outside the establishment, but the same argument can be made about Vivek, right? Like Vivek seems to be coming from outside, but he's also a very successful businessman who has undoubtedly dealt with lobbyists, politicians, all those kinds of things his entire business career. So is he really that outside of the system? I don't know.
He's trying. Well, he cannot be. You have to be in a system, unfortunately, otherwise you cannot get ahead. But, at least he's trying to change it. Some of the stuff he's talking about is radical. But, I can see that which scares the heck out of me. That would make kind of, in a way, yes, you doubt it. But I can see choosing Trump for like Nikki Haley might be a good choice for him because she's a woman. There's lots of support for her, believe it or not, and the big money are behind her, donors and stuff. Big donors.
And if he and his campaign wait until after it's more obvious that Biden will actually be the person he's up against, I don't think it will have the same detrimental effect on the outcome as it would before that determination. Is that making sense? Like, the voting base that wants to vote for Trump now, that would get upset about him running with Nikki Haley. Let's assume that's some percentage. I feel like if they ultimately knew if Trump didn't win this election, then they have 4 more years of Biden. Then even with Nikki Haley on the ticket, I feel like they'll still vote for Trump. Just to not see. Do you get what I'm saying? But if Trump makes that announcement before it gets that far along, I think you're going to see a lot of upset and disdain for Trump's decision that might push people more towards RFK, Scarily, or Vivek, DeSantis, that kind of thing, So, but that'll of course be before.
Right. Anybody who's watching Vivek, or actually kind of gets to hear his messages and stuff, they are like me, truly impressed. And they see that contrast between the people that are running and him. You know what I mean? They see that difference, and it's so obvious. He cannot, dispute it. It's just, are going to people actually be afraid? Because this is in such a way it's so radical. Everybody wants it, but it's so radical. People are afraid. People are afraid of change, believe it or not.
Yeah.
No. Out of comfort, they're going to vote for something that, kind of keeps things the same, unfortunately. Even when we need desperately, something new to try. But anyway, we will have to finish here.
Yeah. All right. Well, it was another good discussion of completely random topics that came up in the news in the last couple of weeks. But thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next podcast. Any last words?
No. See you next time.
Short and concise as always. All right. Thanks everyone.